like, I always feel like there's like a lag between when he presses go live and when we know that we're live. And so I'm always like, when is that
Are we
moment?
live? Yeah.
This is
We're
that.
live. Okay, awesome.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome, Emily. I'll start with a quick introduction so everyone knows who we are before we hop into today's discussion. Hi, folks. I'm Kritika. I'm the co-founder of Looppanel. We are a user research product, and we help folks go from user interviews to insights 5 times faster. We can talk a lot about that later, but first, I want Emily to be able to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Emilie Mazurek. Some of you might know me from LinkedIn, but I am a senior user experience designer from a non-traditional background. I was actually on the path to becoming a doctor when I realized that was totally not the best fit for me. So anyways, I went through a boot camp and have since come out on the other side and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think some of my conversations with you have been the most fun because it's always so interesting, your journey through all of the different phases of your career. And folks, if you're interested, we have written articles about how to use boot camps to break into UX with Emily before and how to use ADP List effectively. So you can find those. I think they're already linked in the live chat, but yeah, those are on our blog as well. Today, however, we will be talking about something very topical. So I know that the economy and the market has not been very friendly, as all of us know, over the last few months and even like a year and a half or so at this point. And so a lot of people are potentially facing or have faced layoffs. There's a lot of uncertainty. Emily is amazing. She has been through a lot of career journeys and trajectories. She also was recently laid off, and then she bounced back and found a new role as well. So we thought, why don't we make this a conversation? Why don't we talk about, with this uncertainty, are there ways that even if we have our jobs, we want to prepare ourselves for the future? Or if we do get laid off, how do we approach that? How do we bounce back? And so we'll be touching on some of those topics. You can obviously, of course, add any questions you have to the chat, and we'll try to take those as well. But I'm excited to dig in. Emily, I guess I wanted to start with just the basics. Like, in terms of your journey, I know before the whole layoff situation happened, you, of course, were in a new role. You were really excited about it. What are some things you wish you had done or you would now advise like other people to do to say, hey, you should do these few things to make sure you are prepared, you are taking care of yourself, whether or not that layoff happens, just because of the level of uncertainty in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate that I actually took my own advice in this circumstance, so I wasn't in a much worse position. But you have to really think about like, what would you need to apply for a new job, which maybe isn't the best mindset when you're starting a new role. But you really just have to like look out for yourself and protect yourself. So any designer is going to need a portfolio with relevant and recent strong case studies. That's going to be so much harder to put together a compelling case study if you don't have any resources. You can be locked out of your computer in an instant, not have access to your emails, your Slack messages, your Figma files, prototypes. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be much worse. So think about what you would need to put those case studies together. And of course, the best case scenario would just be do this as you can as you're working. I know nobody does that. So please just make sure that you have the files that you need available. So when you're ready to make those case studies, or if you're in a position where you need to be making those case studies, you have all the material that you need. There can be some implications legally about this, stealing company work. So make sure you're chatting with your manager and asking, hey, if I want to build a case study on this, what is appropriate for me to share and not? Some things are private and are not for you to publicly share. And that can put you, again, in a much worse situation. So just be thinking critically about that. So Figma files, really nice if you can have a copy of those. If you can have key impacts and results that you actually were able to achieve with your work, any kind of metrics, data, qualitative insights from users that you've interviewed, anything like that is going to make your work so much more impactful rather than, I did this, it looks great. And okay, well, what was the impact of that? So just keeping that in mind. And hi viewers, sorry, I'm just seeing the chat here. Nice to see you here. And what else? Yeah, just if you can try to be on good terms also with your colleagues and peers, because opportunities can always come from that as well. So just try to be thinking about that from all angles. It can also help you in other ways too, rather than if you're just, facing imminent layoffs or doom.
Also wanted to say a quick shout out to everyone who's joined. Hi, Diparati. Hi, Serenity, Cynthia. So glad to have you folks here. So feel free to jump in with questions as well. But I think that was a really good start, Emilie. It's pretty impressive that you were on the ball with this and you had all of this ready to go, luckily. Is it true, like, do people actually get locked out immediately from their laptops? Because I've heard that, but it's like a very scary sounding, like immediately cut off from everything that you worked on.
Yes.
Okay, that's very clear. Just be prepared. That could happen. Obviously, nobody wants it to, but just in case.
Some companies are a bit more lenient and, are understanding that you need to be able to gather resources. Others are not. It can just totally depend. So best to just prepare in case.
Got it. Is there anything else you did other than like making sure you had the materials for case studies? And I mean, I realized that how I would so quickly like forget what I'd worked on as well. So super important to have some of those metrics. Was there anything else that you did just in advance to prepare yourself?
I don't really think so, to be fair. Like, it's pretty challenging already to kind of anticipate those situations, but I think also keeping up on LinkedIn, trying to stay active there and continue building connections and being active in the community, that only ever helps. And I was able to benefit from that afterwards as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So make friends in the community in general, and maybe that could be an ongoing thing. It's not the most natural, I know, for everyone, but if you can make that part of your habit, if you can find cohorts of designers, researchers, whatever your job role is, where you can keep making connections, it will pay off in the future.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to ask you, actually, there's also this element, like we talked about, when you suddenly maybe get kicked out of your computer or you have a very difficult conversation, someone's like, hey, we are cutting this role. What did that emotionally feel like for you, and how did you kind of process it and react to it?
It kind of just feels like the rug is being like ripped out from under your feet. And it's really hard not to take it personally or think that you could have done something differently to prevent this, which is almost never the case. So take as much time as you need. I took a full week off. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I didn't even tell my friends. I told like my fiance and like my close family, and just kind of wallowed. And I think that's okay. Give yourself permission to feel what you need to feel. And then when I was ready, I started, kind of quietly. I was a bit, embarrassed really about the whole situation. I felt like I had a lot of things going for me, and it kind of reintroduces that imposter syndrome, to be fair. Did I deserve this? You kind of start asking all these questions, having this self-doubt. It's not productive at the end of the day. You still may need to go through all of those emotions, but, eventually I had to pick myself up and recognize that, it's in my power to change the situation. So that kind of helped propel me forward and motivated me to just start doing baby steps to help me get out there. And I was able to connect with a couple of colleagues and people in my network who had opportunities. And that started to, I see, oh, okay, people are interested in my portfolio. I'm getting positive feedback, or, oh, I got invited for an interview. And that kind of reassured me that I was on the right track. So definitely a journey, and not just like belittle, the experience. It's not easy. So if you're feeling that, it's okay. I'm sorry. It's not fun, but you can get through it, and you will get through it. So just hang in there.
Yeah, I find it super interesting because I think, like, of course, layoffs are a version of this, but job hunts in general, there's so much rejection in the process. And so whenever we're talking about stuff related to that, I'm always like, it's hard. It is hard. You are not alone in feeling the struggle, and it is often a struggle. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about changing that. But like you said, know that you will get through it, and like keep your head together, and it'll pass, like all things do.
It's temporary. Yes.
It's temporary. But I am curious, like in the moment when you have that conversation, how do you keep it together? And like, what is maybe an appropriate way to react and a not so great way to react in a situation where layoffs are taking place?
I mean, it's obvious to be like, oh, be strategic and logical. But when you're having a conversation like that, like many emotions that you're not anticipating can come up. It's generally unexpected. It's not like you're really going to be getting a heads up. So start thinking in advance, maybe questions you would want to ask if you're in that situation, severance package, that can also be negotiated. So that's something that you might want to revisit with them. Try to keep that door open if you need to chat with them or anything along those lines. If you're having a big emotional outburst, maybe not the time and place. I know it might feel tempting, especially if that door is getting closed, but it's not really, because you never know if those people might help you out again in the future. So just try to be, I hate to use the word logical, but like, it's pretty black and white, and it's really generally not personal. So just try to take it for what it is and get as much information as you can. That's a good time to ask about, files and any metrics and stuff if you haven't had a chance to gather it. So yeah, just really to be trying to think of like what you can get from them to help set yourself up for success as much as possible afterwards.
Yeah. So it's really easy to have a big emotional reaction there, but for your own good, you may want to keep it professional just so that you can maintain that communication line. The severance package point was actually really good. That's like, that is something where you may want to, work with the person that's on the other side of the table, as well as those data and metrics. So if you're able to keep it cool, if you're not, it's okay, it's understandable, but maybe we can try to walk away and then come back when you're a little bit calmer so that you can have the conversations in an effective way and be like, okay, what do I need to get through this?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I wanted to also ask, like, are there any mistakes that you've seen people have, like things that they do when this process is happening, which really backfire, maybe don't work, things to avoid when you're going through a layoff situation?
I think it can be very tempting to be angry and take things personally. I have seen examples where people take to LinkedIn and post negatively about the company. And that might feel really great in the moment. You might feel vindicated and like, it's not a good look, especially for companies that are looking maybe to bring you on. It kind of paints you as a bit of a liability. So again, just trying to think big picture here. That's the perfect conversation to take to your family and friends offline. So just, be careful about those things too. When you're putting stuff out there on LinkedIn, that is a representation of you and your brand and what employers can look to respect, or not respect, but like receive from you. So trying to stay professional is usually just take the high road. Yeah,
that's a really good one. Also wanted to do quick shout outs to new people who've joined. Hi, Kritika, and hey, Monique. Thank you for joining us, and excited to hear your folks' questions as well. I wanted to also ask, okay, so let's say we've gone through this process, we've wallowed. There's probably a lot of emotional processing happening there. And then you wake up one day and you're like, okay, I need to get it together. Like I feel motivated again to maybe get moving on this. I saw your graphic where it was like, I think you applied to 151 jobs before you got the role that you are in today. I guess before we dig into the specifics of that, how did you even get started? Like, what are the first baby steps you took to help get your grounding together that you would say like, hey, like, when you're ready to get going again, do these 3 things to make sure you're setting yourself up for a positive, as much as possible, recruitment process?
Yeah. So I started with reaching out to like close friends in the community, colleagues, and people in my network, and just kind of letting them know like, hey, I'm back on the market again. In hindsight, I think it would have been much better and more effective for me to just be public with it, be vulnerable in a sense, and not feel so much shame about it, because surprise, once I shared with the community at large, that's when a lot of the opportunities started rolling in and I was able to get more interviews. So, but for me, that's what felt comfortable at the moment, just kind of keeping it more private and seeing if I could get traction that way. And I was able to get some traction. I had some interviews, I had some opportunities, started updating my portfolio and going to ADP List and getting feedback, feedback on my portfolio, feedback on my resume. And also I even did some interview prep. So I met with people that, interview people, and I had mock interviews and they gave me real-time feedback on my answers. So that helped me feel a lot more prepared and like I was doing the right things. So that really helped me build my confidence back up. And then once I had kind of gone through that process, I'd had a couple of those practice interviews, the wrong interviews that didn't materialize into roles that ended up being good practice. I felt more confident and kind of ready to, let the world know, hey, I'm back on the market. I just had my role. Unfortunately, it's been impacted. And like, I'm looking for my next opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. Actually, there's like a theme of like, and I understand, I feel like it would be something that you would naturally experience, is this idea of like shame around this. Like, did I do something? Am I at fault here? But to your point, like, it's not you. This is a broader economic issue. And if you can find a way to tell yourself, like, this is not my fault, but how can I talk about this to people? That's how you will get opportunities. So try to, as much as possible, process the shame and then say, okay, like, how vulnerable can I be? Because people in your network do want to help you. From as far as like my experience has been, as much as possible, they'd want to, be there for you. So if you have those colleagues, try to be vulnerable with them, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
That's lesson number one, just on a macro level. But then it sounds like you're saying, aside from that, the tactical things, update your resume, update your portfolio. Joe Natoli and I did some lives on that. So if you want to review some pro tips,
Awesome.
what not to do, folks can take a look at those. And ADP List, that's a good one as well. So basically put yourself out there in a networking sort of space where you can get feedback. Did ADP List also work as, like, was it primarily to get feedback on your resume and portfolio, or did any job opportunities also emerge from there itself?
They didn't at this time, but I have maintained some of those relationships, and I could see that in the future, it could lend itself to something like that, especially if you do connect with somebody on that level. So yeah, for me, it was great because my income was significantly reduced. Obviously, I was able to get on unemployment insurance, which helped, but paying for coaching and things like that wasn't really something I was wanting to splurge on at the moment. So great free resource that was absolutely able to help me out.
Yeah, big shout out to ADP List. They're awesome. And the last one, interview prep, seems like it was more like psychological almost, just to help you build your confidence up and make sure that when you do go into an interview, you are, feeling good about yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just having some advice too on what to say and what not to say, because from my perspective versus a hiring manager's perspective, it can be a little bit different. So having that from a couple of people and kind of understanding their viewpoint was definitely helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you still, it looks like even with all of this prep, all of the great resources, networks, and in your case, I will say you have an incredible community around you on LinkedIn already, and it still took like 151 job applications. How did you approach those? Like, did you try to apply to every job position? Were you like, okay, I will be very, like, clearly not super selective because you do need that job, but how did you even think about, where do I start?
Yeah. One of the biggest hurdles that I was trying to overcome was, sounds bad, but do I deserve to be in a senior position? Because I was just recently hired into a senior position. I'd been working as an intermediate designer before that, and I had just over a year of experience being a designer. So I knew that was my biggest hurdle going into this, is that a lot of people, even though I had experience doing that and other people deemed me worthy and had given me that role, they might not see it the same way. They want a senior designer to have 3 to 5 years of experience, and that's the hard line. So I was really struggling with, do I apply for senior roles or do I apply for intermediate roles? And I decided that I was really hopeful I could get another senior role because I felt like I was doing a good job in my previous one, and I knew that I had the capacity to do that. I just had to find the right person that, would take a bite on me and believe that I could also do that for them. And I was able to find that. But I did also, apply for some intermediate roles as well to kind of see, did I stand better chances there? And it was pretty much on par. The amounts of that I was able to get interviews for, I would say like equivalent levels. So that also kind of affirmed that I could go for those senior roles and that would be okay. And that was generally the feedback I got when I would get rejected from an interview. We're just looking for someone with more experience, which is always such a painful thing to hear because you can't change that. But because I was getting those interviews and they can see my resume, if they can count years, they know, they still were, wanted to chat with me. So that gave me that confidence that I can keep going ahead with this. And that was one of the biggest struggles that I had, but I was able to overcome it. So I really wanted a senior role, was able to secure that. And I really wanted to stay working remotely was like my other caveat. So as much as, you're right. Like, it's easy to be like, oh, I can't be too picky. Like, I still had some boundaries, or I knew what would be important for me to be fulfilled in a new role. And I was able to find those. And there were some jobs I didn't apply to, because if it doesn't feel like it's going to be a good fit, I'm going to be in this situation again in a handful of months where I'm not, fulfilled with my role, and maybe in just as bad of a situation, or maybe the market's worse then, So it felt like it was important to still look out for those roles that would be a good fit.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I have seen, though, with a lot of folks, I've got this question where they're like, I applied to so many roles and it feels like it's going down a bottomless pit because maybe I don't hear back, maybe I do, but it's a lot of rejection. And it just feels like you have to keep feeding resumes in and it's not going anywhere. Did you find that there was something specific that you did to change that? Like, was it more the networking where interviews unlocked faster, or no, it's just a matter of like you apply to a certain number of roles and at some point in a percentage way, you will get interviews as well if your materials are in place?
I think especially in this market now, you need to be able to stand out in some capacity. And I think it would be really, rude of me to pretend like my LinkedIn presence didn't have a huge impact on me being able to land a role relatively quickly after my last role was impacted. But that wasn't an accident, I had that set up intentionally. So I've been, working on that over the years. Even once I started my new role, keeping up with that, keeping up with relationships, that really helped. But there's a certain number you're going to have to hit to, like the chances that you just apply for one or two roles and you get it right away, even if you have a huge, community on LinkedIn that's supporting you, it's not always that straightforward. So if there's a way that you can stand out applying for roles where you have that kind of background, that would be a really good match for it. So I applied to some biotech companies and got, interviews there because of my background as a scientist. And maybe I didn't have as much experience as they were looking for senior designers, but still piqued their interest and they still wanted to talk to me. So that's a way that you can kind of stand out if you don't have that, LinkedIn community to fall back on necessarily, because I know that I'm a bit of an outlier when it comes to that. But something else to keep in mind too is I tried to kind of keep it minimized. Like, it's really easy when you're laid off and you're unemployed, you have all the time in the world on your head. You should be, applying for jobs 8 hours a day. And that's not the approach that I took, because I need to maintain my mental health as well. So I would wake up, see what new roles have been posted, if they appealed to me, if I thought they could be a good fit, even if I wasn't sure that they were the best fit, to take the chance, see if I can get an interview and use that as a chance to learn more about them. Maybe I learned that it is a better fit than I thought, or maybe it's just really good practice. So again, trying to be kind of strategic about it, not put too much pressure on myself to need to be applying for 8 hours a day. Just doing what I can, and then, filling my time with other things that, might be a bit distracting or but still productive in other ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think I give the same advice to people. It's like, if you are applying for roles, think about what on your resume already sets you up for success in the potential employer's mind. So like you said, if you come from a medical background, biotech, great. Like you have the subject matter expertise that may set you apart. If you're working in a specific, let's say you worked in transport and logistics, are there other transport companies that are hiring designers that might look favorably on that? I know sometimes people want to switch across industries, but think about whatever in your resume right now helps you stand out. The market's a bit shaky, so if you can use that to your advantage, it's definitely a win to do that. One other related question on this. Okay, so we've done this. We've tried to target companies where I will stand out because of something in my resume or my background or network that gives me a step up or a leg up. But I'll also filter for things that I really care about, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be working here for a while and I want to be happy. So let's say we've done that. We've applied with our resumes, portfolios to a bunch of places. That cycle of interviewing is also pretty rigorous and pretty harsh. So was there anything that you did? I guess 2 questions from there. One, learnings from previous interviews. How did you make sure if an interview didn't move forward, how did you make sure you gathered the right data so that the next time things were better? And separating maybe signal from noise there, because sometimes it's just a one-off and sometimes there is a pattern. And the second is the emotional element of it, which is again cycles of like hope and rejection, which is very hard. So how did you manage both of those things?
Yeah, so in terms of the first part of your question, It's always valuable. I mean, especially as a designer, we already know this, but try to get feedback if you can, especially if you made it to like a second round. There's a good chance there was only a handful of candidates that got that far. People might be more inclined to give you some feedback, and it doesn't hurt to ask at that point. The worst that can happen is they don't respond, which they probably wouldn't have anyways if they've already told you that you're not moving forward to the next round. But if you could get any feedback, and that's kind of how I heard that my biggest struggle, not that I didn't interview well, not that my portfolio wasn't good, but just they wanted someone with more experience. So that was helpful for me to kind of understand it's not so much me that I'm the problem, or it's not really like something that I need to fix. So again, that kind of helped boost my confidence, even though it might seem like it wouldn't in a way. Like it kind of reassured me that I was on the right track and I just needed to find a good match. But if you can, all your interview answers weren't strong enough, okay, now that's the time for you to go and brush up on those skills, and you can use that as ammo for the next interview. And then in terms of like learnings from previous job role cycles, I always use Hunter, which is basically just like, it looks kind of like a roadmap, but it's drag and drop, and you have different columns, applied, interested in, phone screen, second round interview, and you can kind of drag them along. And even if you get rejected, it was still kind of like satisfying to drag that job over and kind of clean up the board in a way. So I almost gamified it in a way, if that makes sense. But that was so satisfying to me. Like even if it was rejected, like, great, let's clear out that applied column, So, and then it's nice, again, you have that statistics and data that you can pull at the end, where I was able to kind of make that map and show what the experience is actually like. Not that you need to do that, but for me, that was helpful because week after week, they send you a little update. You applied to this many jobs, you got this many interviews, this many second round interviews. And I could see that week after week, I was making progress. Because even if it doesn't feel like it, because you're not landing the role, that's a really great way to kind of be like, oh, okay, like, I am doing the right things, and this will come to an end eventually, and sooner rather than later, because I am on the right track.
Yeah, that's a good one. It will end eventually. So basically track the data as well. It's probably helpful for you to like review where you've gone, how much effort you put in, where you're maybe getting stuck. This is another piece that I tell people frequently is if you are in this process for a while, you should have a bunch of data points. Are you getting stuck at the point where you are putting your resume into black box but not getting interviews? Are you getting the first round but not the second but not the offer? Like, where is the drop off happening for you specifically? Because if you can identify that, if it's the resume but you're not moving past that to an interview, there may be something that you want to review in terms of your resume, in terms of your portfolio, and or building a network with the relevant organizations. If it's beyond that, maybe you want to ask people, hey, what happened? Was there a specific reason I didn't move to the next round? It would be really helpful for me to understand for future job roles. And again, keep it super professional. You can have like a templatized email and send it definitely to everyone to make sure you're gathering that data.
I would even use ChatGPT to help me like structure what I would want my email to look like and kind of figure out what points I should include. Obviously, like definitely edit it and like make sure that it's not straight from the robot. But there's ways that you can kind of help yourself out with that as well.
Yeah, AI for the win.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you had to do the whole process again, hopefully, fingers crossed, you wouldn't have to for a while. What would you do differently?
I would tell my network right away, because was like a huge game changer at that point in my job search. People wanted to help and they recognized that I was a good designer. And that is how I got my next role. Somebody reached out to me. They saw me on LinkedIn. I had a coffee chat with them, and that's how it started. So those opportunities, and this was not a job that was posted on LinkedIn. So if I hadn't put myself out there and been able to be found, I wouldn't be working at this company today. There's not a high probability of that. So it doesn't hurt to ask, and it's not worth it to be embarrassed.
Yeah, put yourself out there. I am curious also, like, because you mentioned tools and we have some resources that we build on our side as well. Other than say LinkedIn, and I know we've talked about ADP List, were there any specific tools you used, or actually even including LinkedIn, if there were some unique ways you leveraged it? What were the tools and websites and resources that helped you navigate through the process, the most useful things? I know you mentioned Hunter as well, but just wanted to bring it all together and have a consolidated.
Yeah, absolutely. So for resume, I was using Resume by Juan Salting. You can put in your job title, what you did, and the AI auto generates 3 strong bullet points that has metrics in it, which is exactly what you want for your role. And that's always the hardest things, like, well, I don't know what the conversion rate was, or because maybe you weren't in your role long enough to, but they have other statistics like had meetings with up to 10 stakeholders. That's a metric. Like had, interviews with 3 customers that had a success rate of 100%. That's a metric, right? So that was really good to kind of jog my memory and see how I could include those metrics in a way that wasn't just like, impacting the dollar or the bottom line. And to really strengthen your resume, because that's one of the most impactful ways that you can improve your resume is by having, strong statistics of how you actually had an impact in those roles. So that was great. And it's free. You can generate up to 10 bullet points, I think. And then if you need more, you could just create another account, but I definitely didn't do that. And when it came to, portfolio and interview feedback, I think ADP List, especially for a free resource, is going to be one that's worth looking into. I recommend filtering by seniority. So manager, director, or lead, those types of roles are generally going to have more experience doing interviews. And look for people that even have mock interview on their profile if you want to practice that. And then just kind of message them in advance, asking them if they provide this and if we could use our time for that. I even had somebody that sent me a fake, well, it wasn't fake, it was an old job posting so that I could practice and kind of learn about the role and be ready for the interviews. So that ended up being a great tool. I already mentioned Hunter to kind of track your progress as you're going along. And yeah, LinkedIn was like the hugest tool for me, just in terms of like how I've been leveraging it over the years. But even if you haven't been, it still doesn't hurt to be vulnerable and out there and open to opportunities, because that's how it happened for me. Somebody wrote into my inbox and I responded to them. If I wasn't active on LinkedIn, didn't see their message, again, wouldn't have happened. So it doesn't hurt to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Also plugging, we have a job board on the Looppanel website. We'll put that as well in the chat so that you can head over there. We compile a list of around 40 open roles in UX every 2 weeks. It's fresh ones that'll come
awesome.
in the inbox. Yeah. So whenever folks are struggling, I'm like, here's the latest open list of roles. We try to tag like different geographies and that kind of thing. So it's easy for you to find like what's relevant for you.
Oh, I love that you're updating it that frequently too, because that is so important.
Yeah, because the roles also they fill pretty quickly as well. So you just want to make sure it's fresh content, and you want to give people like, okay, you've probably already gone through the last list. Here's a new list that you can work
exactly.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, so those are some resources. But I also noticed that we got a bunch of questions. So I wanted to make sure we read some of those. So I'm just going to read those out verbatim. So here's one. I saw your LinkedIn post and I wanted to ask, why do these companies ghost someone, especially someone with your resume? That's a good question. That was a big.
I didn't end up being a great fit for them, as much as I have confidence and I think I'm a great designer, and I am, but I am for the right company. A lot of these companies, who knows what's going on behind the scenes? Maybe they're experiencing their own layoffs of their own. I had companies that I interviewed at that turned out that they, a couple of weeks later, announced their own layoffs. So that's not always the most encouraging, but like, you just never know. I always assume good intent, but people get busy. Sometimes you just fall through the cracks. Yeah, it sucks to get ghosted. But some of those ghostings also were just from applying for roles and not hearing back. So as much as that's still ghosting, it doesn't hurt as much as when you get to the second round interview and you don't hear for a couple of weeks. I actually just got a job rejection from a role that I applied to 4 months ago. Unfortunately, I was not picked for interview. And I was like, thank God, because I don't want to work at a company that's that disorganized. So you just never know what's going on behind the scenes.
I don't know if it's a good thing that they sent you that email.
No, it's not really. Like, I'm like, who is this company? Like, yeah.
Okay, well,
it told me a lot more about them than it did about me. I'll just put it that way. Yeah.
Which is also another lesson, is like, maybe with the ghosting, potentially don't try not to take it personally, because clearly like a huge percentage of companies, you just saw from that graphic, like a lot of them just don't respond. So it's not you, it's something about the way their operations work or something like that.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay, next one. I completely agree with you that having an active LinkedIn helps, but so many people haven't really started out on LinkedIn yet and don't know where to start. Any advice for them?
Yeah, I know it can be super overwhelming because that's how I felt when I started. And it's a lot of pressure to be posting all the time and have really interesting content and putting it at the right time of day to feed the algorithm. And it's just like, I would just encourage you to start small. And if you can comment on people's posts, that is still posting. And that is a lot less effort than trying to come up with your own content, a lot less intimidating as well. And that still gets your name out there and in the feed, which is the ultimate goal, right? I actually have a colleague from my boot camp and she got a role and she claims because she was nice on LinkedIn, she wasn't creating a lot of content. She was just active in the community and people saw her name come up over and over again and saw that, she had a voice and she had opinions and she was interesting. So her name kind of stuck out. So that's a nice way that you can kind of dip your toe in without needing to put all this pressure on yourself to come up with content. But if you're wanting to post, the two rules that I generally follow is like, is it interesting or is it helpful? And those are usually the things that resonate best with people. And that's kind of how I've built my brand, so to speak, from there.
Yeah. We also have, I think our first conversation, we'd written out a little bit about the steps you can follow. So we'll try to put that in chat. And there's another article that we've written also on like, okay, like do these specific steps. It is hard though. I will say it's like not easy to be putting yourself out there, especially I think some people it comes more naturally for than others. So I get why not everyone wants to. And I think commenting on other folks' discussions, articles is a great way to get started, like you said.
Awesome. Yeah, it can be a little uncomfortable. I definitely know that feeling.
Actually, it is very impressive that you overcame that, because I remember from our first chat, you mentioned that it was because like a career advice person had told you to do that, but you actually took the plunge. So it's pretty cool that sometimes you just got to bite the bullet, folks. You just got to make yourselves uncomfortable for the greater good of your LinkedIn journey.
Yeah, and I started small too. I think I was posting once a month, just kind of see how it was, twice a month. And now even still, I don't post more than twice a week. So, having boundaries and just using it to try to kind of show that I'm active in the community is really one of the most beneficial things you can do.
Yeah. The other thing you asked, and I actually had this question myself as well, which is in your free time, what did you do other than applying for positions to keep your spirits up?
Yeah, so I actually asked my mentor this as well, like, what books should I be reading? Like, should I be taking a course? And he was like, no, like, do other things that are fulfilling in your life, because those are just as valuable. You don't have to be, learning all the the new features in Figma and like reading 10 books to kind of like stay active. Like, he's like, no, like, go to a museum, enjoy, spend time with friends and family, enjoy, you take it easy. So luckily or not, we were going through a major renovation of our home at the time. So I was able to go to the house pretty much every day and help out with that. So I did a lot of tiling, I did a lot of painting, did a lot of cleaning, and that really helps take your mind off things because you are busy and working. And that also was very fulfilling in a way because I kind of got to put our stamp on the home and save a bunch of money because we didn't have to hire somebody else to do that work. So personally, that's what I did in that circumstance. But I think spend time with friends and family and don't feel bad about taking a break or even a step back. Because again, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and it's not always helpful at that capacity.
Yeah, I agree. I always think about this and I always tell if somebody I'm talking to, like a friend or something, is like stressed when they're unemployed, it's obviously very stressful because you want to have your next step figured out. Like you want to feel like you know what's going on. But it's also probably the only time for a long time that you're going to have empty space where you won't be working a definitive like 8 or 9 hours a day, where you have a lot more mental space as well to do things. So as hard as it is, if you can go to a museum and relax and enjoy that, you're probably not going to be able to do that on a weekday any other time in your life because it is you'll always otherwise be working.
Yeah, it's not always easy, but it doesn't hurt to look at the silver lining and try to make the best, even if it's a bad situation.
Yeah, maybe we stick with the free museums, but we can
exactly. Yeah, I think on the first Thursday of every month, the museum in my city is free. So that was a good opportunity. Yeah.
Good hack. Other question. There are a lot of these, so I'm going to try to get through them. You also had various job interviews. How picky were you towards each job?
As picky as I could afford to be, which wasn't super picky, but I did end up getting more picky as you would get through interviews. There's certain questions that I ask, making sure the company culture is going to be a good fit, making sure work-life balance is really respected. If it was obvious that that wasn't the case, even if they were going to offer me the role, like, I don't think that long-term that would have been a great decision. I would have been in the same position again a couple months down the line when I was miserable. So not super picky from the start. If it was a senior UX role that was remote, those are my two caveats that I wanted to kind of hit those. And then in those interviews is the opportunity for me to learn more about those companies. What's the culture like? What type of work am I going to be doing? Is it more research focused or design focused? Trying to figure out how I fit into that. And that's how I was able to kind of dial it down and find a good fit in the end.
Were there roles where you were like, I actually am not going to do this?
Sorry, I got to find some shade here.
The sun is,
there we go.
sun is moving.
The sun is like.
So I know, like 2 minutes before you were like on the other side, 2 minutes before the
Sorry,
light.
Sorry, Kritika, if you don't mind repeating that one.
Yeah, I was just asking, like, out of the roles that were like further in your process, were there some where you were like, actually, no, I don't want to keep interviewing here. I don't want the role, and actually said no to them?
There was a few where I was like, oh, this might not be a great fit. Like there was one role that I was interviewing for and it seemed good on paper, like the salary was good, but it was a contract role. And I was like, I'm interviewing for some that are full-time. That's more appealing to me. Do I want to be in this situation again where I don't have a role and have to be interviewing? It's much better to be interviewing when you have a role and you don't feel inclined to have to take it. So that was like maybe something that wasn't a great fit. Or I had some people that were asking for a lot of research experience. You know, my background, I'm a scientist and I understand the research method. But in my previous roles, you know, my most recent one, I was pretty much explicitly a visual designer. They just wanted mock-ups and prototypes. Before that, I did a little bit of research, but it was my first role as a designer. Definitely wouldn't consider myself like an expert researcher. So I kind of recognized that, and I think the interviewer recognized too, that probably wasn't going to be the best fit. So little things like that, it doesn't hurt to find out about, or even vacation policies. Some companies have pretty limited vacation policies. I like to take a lot of vacation. I knew that was going to be a problem. So little things like that, obviously it'll be personal to you, but have those things that are kind of red flags or a hard boundary that you don't want to cross, because it's not worth it in the long run. It's really not.
Yeah. So if you're going to be miserable 3 months into the job, maybe don't take it. Then you're going from like one anxiety provoking situation to another.
Yeah, no.
While applying for the many roles, did receiving rejection responses affect you? And if so, how did you overcome this negative phase and persevere?
Yeah, it's disheartening when you get to a second round interview. You feel like you really vibe with the hiring manager and you're excited about the work, and you start to kind of paint this picture that like, maybe this is meant to happen. This is the role for me. Obviously, it's such a good fit. And like, it's not, because you don't get picked. And then that stings even more. But the way to overcome this was just for me to try to get feedback. So I did get that feedback that they wanted people with more experience. So that's one way that I can kind of review myself and take it less personally. They maybe did think I was a great fit, but not for that senior role. And that's fine. You know, they're looking for something else. And I don't want to work at a company where they're not excited about me either. So that was good to hear. And then just building on those skills, talking to other people, talking to mentors. I am having doubts. Should I have a senior position? Yeah, you had one before. Why not? Like, oh, okay. That's all I needed to hear. Right. So just recognizing that I would find that company sooner rather than later, and I just had to keep going along, was really the best way that I could encourage myself.
Yeah. How do you feel about trial tasks, like a small task where you have to prove your skills? I honestly despise these tasks because it's a personal insult to my skills. That one's loaded question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Don't tell me how you feel, right? Yeah, I'm adamantly against them. I think it introduces bias into the hiring process. It takes advantage of people that maybe don't have time or do. Regardless, I think working for free is just, why is that part of the interview process? There's a reason I've spent hours, days, weeks on my portfolio, crafting it in a way that's, beneficial to your audience to kind of understand the work that I'm capable of doing. let's use that. Or if you really want me to do like a task, let's do like a 45-minute whiteboarding challenge in the interview, because those take-home tasks, I think it's disrespectful. And as much as now I would never take one of those again, it's very different when you are jobless and you need a role. So I can see it from both sides. They want to find someone that's a good fit. But I really just fundamentally don't think that actually shows what you would be like to work with, because it's a fictitious situation. Even the scenario is a bit weird where you're working totally siloed on your own if it's a take-home challenge. I guess just to keep it short, I'm against them as well.
Okay, that makes sense. We have a consensus on that one. There's another one about ADP List in particular. I would love to book a session with you on ADP List. Please let us know when you're planning to open up your wait list. Thanks. That's a very specific.
I am so sorry. My waiting list, it's embarrassing. I can't keep up. And it's just like, because I've just been starting this new role. Actually, just got back from a vacation too, because it's the perfect time to go on a big vacation when you're in your probationary period at work. So I'm just catching up on everything. Once I have like the capacity to start taking calls again, I definitely will let people know on LinkedIn, and I'm going through it in first come, first serve order. So get on the wait list if you want to chat with me. Your time will come. It might not be right away, and I apologize about that. I can't keep up. I'm only going to be taking between 2 to 4 calls a week just for my own work-life balance. So that's kind of the way that I have to roll with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have one last question. From whom do you get feedback? From the one you applied to or others? I guess that's like about like, so you get the feedback from the company you applied to or like other people?
It's harder to get feedback from the company you apply to because they're busy. And usually once they've determined that you're not the successful candidate, they're full steam ahead in the other direction. Again, doesn't hurt to reach out and ask. You never know. They might still be willing to write you an email. And if they do, I think that speaks really highly of that company. And that's good information for down the line when you might be in a position again and you kind of start building that relationship as well. Just because you get rejected doesn't mean it's a no forever. You can use that as an opportunity down the line potentially, and even just to get that feedback. And then other ways, I already mentioned ADP List was a great resource for getting feedback. Chatting with my mentor, a great way to get feedback. And even just peers and colleagues that I used to work with, getting feedback from them, always beneficial as well.
So best, if not best, but like definitely good if you can get it from the company, because contextually they know why they made a decision or not. But even other sources of feedback are welcome, positive, helpful for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there anything else? I know we've talked for a while about all things job hunting. Is there anything else like you wish you knew or you would want the community to know as, folks go through this process? Anything that we haven't covered yet?
I think it's really easy to kind of feel isolated and very on your own. And that's not the case. There's a lot of people that are going through this. So I've already mentioned that it's okay to be vulnerable and don't necessarily need to feel embarrassed, but you're really not alone. This is a very common experience and it shouldn't have to be so shameful. So just take it for what it is. You're going to come out on the other side. And again, just recognizing that it's temporary. As much as it sucks, it's not forever. You will come out the other side and you might come out better than before. I feel like I'm in a really great fit now with a company that's really supportive and I'm getting to do work I'm really excited about. So it's hard not to feel positive about it at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really good to see that you've landed in a very healthy, positive space in the end. I think that's everything that we want, like folks had questions about. So I think we're going to wrap up today, but I hope that this was helpful for the audience, that you got your questions answered. You are not alone, like Emilie just said. Emilie was there a little while ago, but there's so many other folks that are still going through the process. So we will put all the resources we talked about in the chat or the links so that you can review them later as well. But I hope that this helped everyone. And thank you, Emilie, for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great questions, everyone. This was super fun and cool to do in a live setting. I hope this was valuable. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Hopefully soon I'll be able to get back on the ADP list, but otherwise, yeah, send me a message. I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll post those resources soon. So